everybody. Good evening, good day, readers, good morning, readers, whenever you may be listening to this. I'm here with some people. Hello, people.
Hello,
again, people.
The people are not all billowing people. Lucas is here. Dr. Eusebio Spider Lucas.
Hello.
And we also have Mike and we have Steve. And Mike and Steve are readers. We are here. We've gathered in the command pod. We're at the halfway point in our story, and we thought we'd stop and have a little bit of a breather and have a bit of a chat about the Age of Worms, the adventure. In a more general sense, we will not talk, if we can, about anything that happens after the beginning of Book 7, which you may or may not, by the time you listen to this, have heard the beginning of. But a warning, if you are catching up with the Billowing Hilltop podcast, this is going to be spoiler-tastic on the events of the first 6 books. There is no way around it. Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hi. How you doing, Mike?
Mike is also running the Age of Worms, but he's also a reader, so he's familiar with the show. Steve. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Mike.
Steve is a reader and a DM, and he's running a Curse of Strahd campaign, and we thought it would be interesting to have Steve in the command pod with us to talk about DMing in general and get his thoughts and reflections and questions around the Age of Worms. And I have, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Eusebio Spider Lucas.
Hello.
I'm not sure that he knows why he's here, but we will work that one out as we go. We'll work that one out as we go.
Sorry, can I just ask again, because I'm a bit slow?
Yeah.
So, if Mike, you run Age of Worms, but you also do it as a podcast, is that right?
No. So I started listening to you guys just as I was starting to run. I was picking up the DM reins, and I thought I really liked the Whispering Cairn, so I thought, well, I'll run Age of Worms because there's a huge wealth of stuff basically that I don't really need to prep for because I could just listen to your podcasts.
That's interesting you say that, because I got into listening to actual play podcasts in order to prep adventures, basically, and to prep systems. There's a podcast called, it's like a podcast network or whatever, called RPG MP3, who have been around forever. A guy called Hal, he's originally from Cumbria, but he's now in, I think, Houston or Austin or Dallas or something. And they've been going forever. They're like the originals. And initially it was, a recorder in the middle of a table as they played D&D, and you could hear the fridge door opening and closing and dogs barking out the window. I was trying to teach myself 4th edition. So that was 2008. Those of you who remember 4th edition, irrespective of any of its discussion of its merits, it's just really different.
Yeah, it was a huge step, wasn't it?
I remember reading the book and just thinking, I don't know that I can DM this without it being a bit of a mess. I listened to these guys play, and that was what taught me 4th edition. And I then got into the Glass Cannon to teach myself how to play Starfinder. Yeah. For me, it's a really good way of learning systems and adventures.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And it was very much that I was enjoying the story because I came late to the party, so I had loads to sort of binge listen. And I was thinking, I really enjoyed this, so
you are not the only
I shall do this one.
Right.
It's an interesting one as also, because I played 3.5, I think was the last. I'd never played 4th edition ever. And then 5th edition came out and I was doing other stuff. And when I came to it, podcasts were just an alien thing to me. I wasn't listening to that. But when Curse of Strahd came around, I was actually DMing it for a totally different group. And I thought, do you know what? There must be some things on YouTube I can look at. And what happened was that you sort of saw the live play stuff, and I just couldn't get on with it. Of watching the people movement and talking took your mind away from the words, what was going on, the story. So I switched and then found podcasts, which just were much, much easier as a medium to go through. So
an audio medium,
but it helped me.
It's easier to just to have it on the background. You can be driving, you can be doing whatever, you can do the washing up, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I listen to loads of podcasts walking to work. I have a 25-minute walk in and out, and that's exactly what I use podcasts for. If I was to watch it on YouTube, I just wouldn't have the time.
But also, you'd bump into things, right, on the way to work.
I would, yes. Yeah. Crossing the road would be very interesting.
Not wanting to diss them, but of course the Critical Role people and the Glass Cannon people, of course, they're essentially all actors in some shape or other, with time on their hands. And so a lot of them started that because it was a good calling card, Don't have any acting jobs. Let's play some D&D. Yeah.
I think Glass Cannon's a bit of a mix. The Glass Cannon audio podcast is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's also snowballed in this ecosystem of streamy stuff. It's become this bigger thing.
Yeah, I listened to the first at least sort of 12, 13 episodes of the Glass Cannon and got quite into it because the DM was like literally watching an American sitcom host. He was fantastic, but it got to sort of 13, whatever it was, and sometimes I think there just is a bit where you can become a bit overloaded, and I have to stop. And maybe that is with podcasts with me for a lot of them, where I have to give myself a break a little bit between episodes. Maybe I get to 12, 13 and think I'm saturated. Now I need to sort of go and listen to something else.
So are you talking about the sort of the Starfinder Glass Cannon or the other?
No, the original. One. So,
because their Starfinder highly recommended. I mean, the story with Mac is just one of the most brilliant bits of engineered D&D.
Maple syrup, whatever that bit is one of the funniest things.
Maple syrup bit, and the boss fight at the end is just.
Yeah,
I don't know how they managed. I mean, they did it with dice supposedly, but just fantastic.
I haven't heard that. So
I'm about to start a Starfinder campaign in the next couple of weeks. So
Mike, Androids and Aliens is where you should be.
Androids and Aliens, definitely worth listening.
Their particular approach and their sense of humour works better almost in a modern world than in a fantasy world.
True. Yes.
Okay, I shall look that up.
So it's kind of funnier. It's very good on teaching you the rules of Starfinder. That's why, because that's how I taught myself Starfinder again.
And they played Androids and Aliens as well, didn't we? We played
the Dead Suns Adventure Path because that was the first one they released. So I just listened to them play that through in order to work out what on earth was going on.
It's a good point. They spark off ideas a lot of the time, even if you scribble it down and half the time you've forgotten them or chucked them in the bin. But it's just they can play a character in a different way that you just pick up on little elements of it, and I found it really, really informative for me when I listened to the Strahd ones, just to give me some ideas and pointers of where I shouldn't go as well, as much as what you should do of where not to go.
Yes.
And I think that the Glass Cannon guys just work so well together. Sometimes you can get a little bit carried along with them and can't pick out things because you're so carried along with the story and their acting, which is interesting.
They're like new school, old school players. Old school, around the table, D&D, but they are more enthusiastic role players, backstory creators, voice actors than your average gaming group. And I think that kind of works for me, which is like you get a little bit more like heightened reality. We are not that.
I mean,
I come up with something the other day. I was thinking, what if I could encapsulate what you guys are? I said, sometimes it's just hold your breath, don't cut me off. I said sometimes it sounds like the famous five have grown up and have learned how to play D&D.
Fuck off.
No, that's absolutely spot on.
But I mean, my understanding of the word actor is that it's actually a term from UML system design. So I mean, that's what I know about acting.
Nobody knows what you're talking about.
I know exactly what Luke's talking about.
God. Well, okay. Yeah. I don't know about the fame. That's just incredibly insulting.
I think it makes sense, actually. If you think about it,
I don't want to think about it.
No, we have to take it, Mike.
What do dogs regularly do? They fall asleep, don't they? Johnny is Timmy.
Right, but then he's not in the famous five. I want to know who's Dick.
Timmy was in the famous five.
That's the important. Oh yes,
lashings of ginger beer have just turned into lashings of beer, basically. That's it.
Soda Stream. Yeah. Tonight's beer, by the way, is the classic neck oil. Yum yum, delicious.
Ditto.
Crisp, sharp summer beer. Yum yum.
And I have a Gloucester Brewery Cascade, which is very nice.
A thought was prompted by something that Steve just said. I wonder when we're listening to these other podcasts, using them as a source of research for the actual adventures that we're going to run, how much they've changed what they're doing. You can see where I'm going with this. In order to make the adventure that they're running through work in a show rather than work in, as it were, real life. Does that make sense as a question?
I think it does make sense as a question, and I think that's where you and I probably have very different experiences. I know we've spoken quite extensively about changes that you've had to make in order to make the podcast more interesting, and I've stayed true to the book because, frankly, I don't. It's whether I'm enjoying it, and nobody else.
I have made changes from the Adventurers published, sort of, to make it work. In the rule that we set ourselves when we did this was we were just going to play D&D as we always played D&D and record it and then tidy it up and put it out and see if it turned into anything. And it's turned into loads and loads of episodes, and we have, I think, comfortably at least 12 loyal readers, which has made it all worthwhile. 10 not including you two. But actually most of the changes I've made have been because I've been reading ahead and thinking I think they're going to get bored of this bit. Those two things serve the same purpose, right? Because it's all about removing stuff. Basically, I've just chopped loads out. Should we talk about the Age of Worms? Like, as an adventure? I don't know where to start. Has anybody got any questions?
I don't think it's a question. I think I suppose it pertains to what you've just been talking about, is the only person that can really decide whether it's right or wrong, I suppose, is you, Mike, because the players are just, sort of dancing to your tune, really. So if you feel that something is not right and you've cut it out or added in whatever, the guys are not going to know until you bring it out. And I think that throughout the show, I don't think, from what I've spoke to Mike about of his game, there's nothing that stands out where, or let me ask you that question. Do you feel there's any part of that has suddenly fallen down a hole and you think, why did I do that?
It's difficult to prove an absence or whatever it is, or to prove a negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of the stuff has been removal. It's very difficult to say, well, I took that out and the whole, right? If I added stuff in, then it didn't work. And I have added some stuff in, but really more backgroundy stuff. If I added stuff in and it didn't work, then I'd be like, you're an idiot. Why did you put that whole bit in? It went on forever. They were all bored. It just didn't work. Removing stuff, it's very difficult to prove to yourself, right? It's very difficult to assess whether or not that was the right idea, because you never know what it would have been like if you'd left it in.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle, in that where you're saying you can't disprove a negative, or you can't prove a negative, I sort of think you can in some ways, because one of the things that I struggled with Age of Worms being such a big body of work, all printed out, it's probably 2.5 inches thick.
Right.
It's a huge amount of work. And one of the things that I didn't want to do was take stuff out that I then subsequently thought, oh, why have you taken that out? I've messed something up now because a whole section is not here. And actually, I think adding stuff in a published adventure is probably easier than taking it out, because once you take it out, you can't. There was a few bits that I sort of glossed over with my guys that then just didn't make sense.
That's interesting. Which bits did you gloss over?
Chapters 1 to 7. This is Mike.
Yeah. No.
Oh, Dan has joined us. Hello, Dan.
Hello.
Evening.
Dan is late to the command pod. We were meant to be chatting about the Age of Worms, but we've only just started. We've been chatting about podcasts. But Dan, meet Mike, who is running the Age of Worms and is a reader.
Mike.
Hi.
And meet Steve, who is not running the Age of Worms, but is also a reader.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Dan.
Just as you know, Dr. Eusebio Spider Lucas, and he doesn't know you. You know Dan, and Dan doesn't know you. It's kind of weird, but there we go.
Yes.
That's the odd thing about doing a podcast.
That's broadcast media for you, isn't it?
Broad, narrowcast.
Broadcast media for you.
12cast. We were talking about removing stuff from an adventure, not necessarily just for a podcast, but just in general. And it turns out that Mike, as he's been running the Age of Worms, by the way, I think we should say up front that Mike has finished running the Age of Worms.
Oh.
And he started after we did.
Yeah, well, that's
what the fuck has been going on there?
Well,
He's obviously got better players than...
Well, the point here is that he said he'd removed some stuff. I'm just wondering exactly how much he removed.
Books 4 to 8.
All the monsters. All the monsters and all the doors.
Yeah. I won't give details because it's...
not after the beginning of book 7.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Some of the things I removed were in book 7, and it then bit me a little bit.
Okay.
Where certain things then didn't really flow. How many
books in total are there again?
There are 12 books.
12 long books.
Oh
my god.
And that's the reason we finished, is I felt that, so we got up to the end of book 8, and from book 8, and I won't give anything huge away. There's actually only 2 or 3 things that you need to do, but they managed to sort of spin it out into 4 books.
This isn't selling the show, Mike.
Well, exactly. You're going to have to cut this bit out.
No, we'll keep it. We'll keep all of this.
Once you've got through 7, it's going to be really boring for 40.
No.
Mike,
8.
This thought has occurred to me, Mike. I'm acutely conscious because this again. We were talking about Glass Cannon, right? They get into the closing section of that enormous adventure path they do. Everything becomes hugely kind of high level, 15th level, 16th, 17th level, and Paizo do tend to kind of get a bit. Well, you know what I mean, Mike. It tends to become a bit of a procession.
Yes, and that's very much the way I felt it was going, and I wanted to wrap the story up at about level 15, 16 rather than 20. Just because it felt as though it was starting to sort of stall a little bit, particularly for my players.
This is the thing that we've got to face. I read a certain amount ahead, but I don't read too far ahead. And I'm conscious that though I think I've done an enormous amount of editing and fixing and changing in the bits that we've done before, I don't think that's going to be anything compared to what we're going to do later. And I wonder whether or not we're going to condense quite a lot the material in the last section of the adventure. I think we're going to condense quite a lot.
You could bring a lot of other stuff to play to make it pace properly. The thing that I'm interested in is how D&D 5 plays at high level, because one of the things that I understand from the game is that it's intended to extend the sweet spot. So we've played many adventures and kind of finished around 13th level when it starts getting too unwieldy.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see if they've successfully managed to extend the sweet spot in 5e. And maybe you have an opinion on that. I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, Mike's the one that knows because he's run
exactly. That's what I'm asking because
I do have an opinion on that. I've got an opinion on everything.
So does Dan.
I absolutely do have an opinion on that, and I have to be honest. It doesn't feel to me like they've extended the sweet spot quite up to level 20. I think things become a little bit of a mess after 14, 15, 16. Around so up to tier 3. So tier 1, deadly squishy and stuff.
Yeah.
Tiers 2 and 3 I absolutely love. Once you get up to 4, once you get up to about 15, I really enjoy those levels. I think after that, this is one of the things that I wrote down actually. I think the action economy kind of takes over. And
Mike's written stuff down, Dan. Yeah,
I have. I think the action economy takes over, and it becomes quite hard to balance encounters. I know you've got things to mend that, sort of like legendary actions and lair actions and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, the most fun is around sort of the 10 mark.
Yeah.
Which means they have slightly extended the sweet spot, right? Because the classic sweet spot was sort of 4th, 5th, where you got your first fireball spell, to about 9th, 10th, when things got a little bit overblown. I'm really talking about kind of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, well, whatever editions. Doesn't really matter. If they've managed to kind of crank it up to the point where, put it this way, the last Pathfinder adventure that we ran, I think around 14, 15, you just think, I can't do this anymore. It's just
took hours, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a victim of its own cleverness at the lower levels. That it's. I suppose if you're playing any character from level 1 or 2, whatever you're doing, right through, you've got a fighting chance purely because you live and breathe most of the abilities and the spells and whatever, and you get there and you've already probably identified your main abilities and spells, and the rest of it is just all sort of add-ons. But we're about. I know this is sort of slightly going on a tangent, but we're about to do Tomb of Horrors, and we're going in at 14th level, and I've never played anything over 12th level. Now,
sorry, 5th edition Tomb of Horrors.
Yes, 5th edition Tomb of Horrors. So to jump in at 14th level, I'm thinking you've got to get your head round all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Without having any backdrop.
I think that's easier in 5th than it was in previous editions because
I'll hold you to that, Mike.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, there's a couple of things that go on that they've done in order to make it a little easier, I think. One of them is specifically item attunement, right? Means that people don't have this sort of golf bag of magical items that they're constantly pulling from, but it just means that the power level escalates. And anybody...
that was the game that we played when we were 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how many
yeah.
magical items can you pile onto one?
Yeah, and I think anybody who breaks that item attunement rule in their campaign, I think it's a fundamentally awful mistake.
I think one more attunement is not.
I think if you added another attunement slot, for example, to people, I think that would just, I mean, you're just playing with fire.
Unless, of course, you were planning to take it away from everybody at an opportune moment.
Yeah, or if it was gained in such a way that the price of gaining that
was going to be something
so
really
this is
horrible.
an in-joke, chaps, that Dr. Eusebio, Dan and I are showing because of stuff that we've just been doing. D&D fails at high level, right? I think there's a simple reason for that, which is that the prospectus of D&D is that you turn into a super fantasy hero. You've got to therefore build a set of rules that take you from 0 to super fantasy hero, but it turns out that being a super fantasy hero is not very interesting.
Very.
Yeah.
And very complicated. And actually being a kind of medium fantasy hero is really interesting.
I mean, all of the famous stories are basically, they're not high-level characters, except for usually one who happens to be the sort of the Gandalf, right?
Yeah.
And all of the other characters.
The literature, right.
Literature, yes.
Yeah.
Or films or whatever. I mean, even
Gandalf's like a 5th level cleric, isn't he, or something? I mean, that's
But I mean, even X-Men.
Second level monk.
That goes back into the age-old discussion of high fantasy and low fantasy and what you prefer. And as much as I'm on the side of low and I enjoy all of the sort of lower levels, and I like characters being frightened of a goblin or something, but there's other people that would much be rather riding a unicorn or and fighting dragons.
I mean, I think that at high level, what hasn't really been considered is the story arc of the characters, right?
Yeah.
So at the start, you have the backstory, which is like, who is this person? During the course of an adventure, they get fleshed out, and then at the end, when you get to high level, they should retire in some way. And so I think that the kind of additional world building that you've been doing in this Age of Worms, with the additional material you put in and stuff that we've been doing in previous adventures, has been a progression in our play.
For what we're doing now, we don't play D&D the way that we normally play D&D. We basically...
No.
I mean, people will find this laughable, but this is about as character-driven as we have ever been.
But it was something that I tried to do in the Malazan thing.
Yeah.
And
Dan's run a Malazan campaign based around the Malazan books, where he's done a load of backstory work, feeding the characters into the story.
That's kind of what I like about Paizo, is that they take the structure of D&D and they've expanded it to sort of big story arcs. When we started playing, it was just, you see 3 doors and a hallway.
Or in Mike's version of the Age of Worms, just a hallway.
And that has morphed, I think, largely thanks to Paizo, with the adventure parts, has expanded out to more story focus, which is what I like about things like Age of Worms. A story arc. And so the characters can fit into that story arc. When they get to, say, 20th level, they should retire somewhere and appear in the next adventure that you run in the same world or something like that.
Forgotten Realms did a bit of that. I mean, I think
I think Paizo and Galarian kind of took
I think this gets us back to the subject, which is Greyhawk. So the Age of Worms was released in 2000 and, Mike, tell me if I got this wrong, 2006?
Something like that. Yep.
It's one of the last things that Paizo did for D&D, because they used to publish 2 magazines under license from Wizards of the Coast for 3rd edition. Dragon Magazine, the storied whatever, and then Dungeon Magazine, which was just adventures. And in that, they started this new idea of theirs, which was a series of adventures, what they would call an adventure path, that ran over time, serialized in X number of editions. And that has become their bread and butter. Age of Worms is the second one they ever did. There's something called is it called the Shackled City? Mike, you know this stuff so much better than I do.
I really don't.
Okay, well, there was whatever. They released a thing called I think it was called the Shackled City. It was a set of 12 adventures in 12 issues over the course of a year, which took you from first level to, 17, 18, something like that. And then they did it, sorry, put my teeth in, and then they did it again. Oh, God, I can't say it. And then they did it. I can't say the word did it. I can say the word did it. And then they did it. I can't say it when you have to say it in the thing.
It's an amusing thing. Keep going.
And then they did it again with the Age of Worms. The adventure path has just become that classic stock in trade. Dice and Desire, podcast next door, they're doing Storm King's Thunder. It's just another adventure path, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree with that. So if you take, what's that one we're doing with Johnny's?
Oh God,
what's it called?
What's it called? Princess of the Apocalypse.
Princess of the Apocalypse. That feels much more like a traditional dungeon.
I don't think that's an adventure path.
No, exactly. Wizards, Hasbro, have basically diversified, so they're obviously not going down exclusively down that adventure path, I don't think.
They're more of a mix, but what I'm saying is that the idea, and obviously the first adventure path was probably B1, B whatever it was, and then Against the Giants and all that kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah, back in the early days, they sort of, if you remember the Queen of the Demon Wed Pits and all those.
Yeah, the Demon Wed Pits. Yeah,
they linked all of those stories together.
Yeah,
and you could almost have a story arc of maybe 10 different modules, all of which you would buy and run individually or together.
Yeah,
they worked as sort of stories on their own, and actually, I think Paizo have done that in that all of the books in the Age of Worms, they give you background such that you can just run that one module.
They're very useful, those background bits, by the way, in an inadvertent way. If you read the thing which says, if your players have never played any of the other preceding bits, this is how to get them into the story. It tells you basically what the story is, in essence.
Yeah.
Right? And it's absolutely vital with these players, right? Because they can't remember
anything.
Stuff from 10 minutes ago in the previous session. Anyway, Greyhawk, sorry, my point being, Greyhawk is where the Age of Worms was set originally. And Greyhawk was the first, again, Mike Lucas might know this, was the first setting, as it were, that got published, right? I mean, it's so old, Greyhawk. It belonged to one of the founding, I don't think was it Gygax or was it Arneson?
Gygax and Arneson.
One of them, wasn't it? It was right.
One of them.
Together,
like Tenser and Leomund and Bigby and all of those kind of characters that then gave their names to the spells in the first rule books were characters in this game that they played, and Greyhawk is the setting, and Paizo were allowed to publish adventures set in this canon setting. But I don't know anything about Greyhawk, so I had to move it and put it somewhere else, which takes us to the Age of Worms. What we've changed. You did. I know you did. I really enjoyed the Greyhawk stuff you ran.
And
I think
at the time, Joss was running Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
And I always thought they were quite similar.
Well, to be honest, Galarian is similar, right? I mean, it's like
true.
You've always got a sort of capital city, which is sort of a centre of empire.
Yes.
And then you always start in a smaller town. And then how did the dwarves come up from below the earth? And then how the elves came out of the trees and all that kind of, anyway.
Whatever decision you made the right one, because sometimes when you take a massive backdrop of history and everything else in a setting, as a DM, sometimes you can just get lost and go down a tunnel, and by extracting it and putting it in a much more manageable way, I just think for you guys, it shows massively on the podcast that whether this is true or not, but you've got it under control and you pluck out bits apart from the calendar occasionally, which
fuck off. That is. I'm not. What's happened here is that we've cheated, right? In the old days, right? I ran an adventure and I didn't have a setting for it, so I sort of cobbled something together as we went. And we used to joke that it was called Sketchy World because most of the time there was no answer, and I would just sort of come up with whatever we needed at that point. Well, that is really where we've set the Age of Worms, in the sense that the stuff that came out of playing that campaign for a while and me making notes as we went is where we've got it set.
But for billowing, I think what's great is that because
it's disguise for billowing. Yeah. Oh yeah.
If it was set in one of the traditional settings, the problem is you also get listeners or readers, sorry.
Oh yeah.
Would be reading
I think you'll find.
would be some of them might be sort of picking up on bits and saying, well, that's not correct. Where this way, everybody's in the same boat. We all go along. And if you say fart is a month, then we believe
it is a month.
That's what it is. So,
and the other thing is that if you acknowledge that it's obvious that this is being slightly pulled together as we go, then you're not trying to kind of say we've got this grand creation that we're playing our thing through.
Yeah,
it's almost sort of saying don't look too far over the horizon, right? Don't open that door in the back there. There's nothing behind it. The idea that it's all a little bit kind of cobbled together is kind of part of the joke that we sort of amuse ourselves with. Anyway, so changes to the Age of Worms. Mike, you've ran it as canon in Greyhawk?
Yes, I ran it in Greyhawk, primarily just because I didn't want to do the work to move anywhere else. And I've always quite liked Greyhawk. And then I found out that there is a character that you're about to meet, who was a sort of a remodel of Tensor from the original Greyhawk world, and I'm like, oh right, I'm definitely leaving it in Greyhawk. So yeah, I ran.
That's not a spoiler. I think we've referred to it. In our version, he's renamed to Marcus Doombringer.
Yep.
And the reason he's renamed to Marcus Doombringer is because Johnny's favourite ever character was a very high level wizard called Marcus Doombringer that he goes on and on and on about to the point where
the joke was that he would appear on a billowing hilltop.
That's why we're called the Billowing Hilltop. So we've renamed this character Marcus Doombringer. We've not met him yet in the story, unless it takes me forever to edit this, in which case we hope you enjoyed meeting him in the story. And he's got a very strange accent that we used. And basically, it's a stick to beat Johnny with, because if Johnny doesn't behave, we will make Marcus Doombringer increasingly ridiculous. That's basically what we're doing.
And I think that works.
It has, in fact, worked. Yeah.
I kept it as Greyhawk, and I ran it as Diamond Lake was, a few hours out of the free city of Greyhawk.
Yeah.
And then I had Mage Point as where it was.
So what we changed was Greyhawk became Evenstar, and all I've done is change the Pantheon, really. New gods, new days of the week. I mean, just the stuff that you really needed.
Yeah,
it's just too much.
I think we've gone a bit further than we ever had before, or you've gone a bit further with the character backstories and how they have material impact on the game, and I like that.
But to reveal the secrets a little bit, wasn't all worked out before we started. In the same way that the world wasn't all worked out before we started, we've sort of, as we've gone backwards and forwards between ourselves about what might be going on with these characters as we've come across elements of the story that we think there is a bit of something in, a bit of potential in.
I don't think you need to go too far from the sort of the Pantheon and the environment, really. I think it holds as a story, it holds your hand. So you go to Diamond Lake, you go to Mage Point, you go to the Free City. You can reskin those and call them what you want, really.
Well, we have. It's not called Mage Point for starters.
Exactly.
We've not filled in any more than we needed to. I mean, you need 3 gods for the Airborne Triad, for example, Mike. Right? So you took Erythnal Vecna?
Yep, I kept them as they were, and I'm glad I did.
Hextor, Erythnal, and Vecna. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, and with Vecna being so sort of wrapped up in Stranger Things, I think I'm quite glad I chose that one.
So we've got Banshivu, the Grey Woodsman, and Asmodee.
Yeah.
So those were just
Vecna, though, is it?
Well, you've not been paying attention, obviously, Bonds, but we'll get to that.
Vecna's got an agent now. You can't get to him anymore. So.
What was the name of the god of things in little things in cupboards? Or something?
Winzim, filler of cupboards.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, let's not get into a whole thing with the Pantheon, because I'll just, it's a fully realised. Yeah.
That's how he gets to sleep at night is reciting his gods.
There's Tonge, obviously. Urt, the Moulder of Worlds. Deborah Cadabra. The Lady Luck Misfortune, which is what Sessions is a cleric of. I mean, it does play in, and you can have fun with this stuff.
Standing Wave.
Banjetti, Mistress of Chance Meetings. Tiny Arthur, Godlet of Wagons. I think we've talked enough.
You're reading this out, obviously.
No, it's all up here.
It's all part of your hyperlinked Word document.
Which one of the 6 folders have you got out now, Mike?
Anyway, maybe we should work our way through the story books, Mike, and talk about them. Talk about what we liked and what we didn't like, and what we changed.
God forbid in chronological order.
And get chip-ins from Dr. Eusebio, Spider Lucas, and Bonds, and Steve. Steve's going to get lost after a couple, because Steve has not listened to all the episodes. Naughty Steve.
I've dipped in and out. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
so book 1.
Book 1, The Whispering Cairn. Mike, you ran it as is?
So, yeah, I ran it literally verbatim. And I have to be honest, I absolutely bloody love Whispering Cairn. I think
it's a fantastic adventure.
I think it's one of the absolute classics. I'm a big fan of the Tales of the Yawning Portal.
Yeah.
And I think Whispering Cairn is every bit as good as any of the classic D&D modules of older year.
Days of Yore, yeah.
Yes, and I would happily run it for any group. I think you could.
Well, don't run it for these two.
Well, obviously,
Because-
yeah.
Well,
Actually,
we've
no.
done
Do you
it.
know what? They'd probably fuck it up.
They would.
Well, we've
they
done
wouldn't remember it.
No.
Yeah.
What colour was that lantern again? Yeah.
Well,
I forget nothing.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? It was really clever. It had it had puzzles. It had all the lanterns that you had to sort out. It had the trap with the wind at the top of the thing you had to climb. Then it had the ghost, Alistair Land, plus all the intrigue back at the city, back at the town.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great.
And
module.
did they do the other bit that my lot didn't do and still haven't done? Yes.
Which
What is that?
Well, there's the lair of the architect, and there's this is all good. This is, by the way, from this point onwards, dear readers, this is going to be spoiler-tastic.
Oh,
There's
right.
the lair of the architect, and then there's the lair of the whatever, right?
Oh, and yours didn't go down there, did
No,
they?
they didn't.
No.
Never did.
Well,
No.
Actually, I can
Still sitting there.
I can tell you this as well, because one of the questions on Graham's list was, what's the best bit that the characters messed up on?
Graham has given us a list to look at, dear readers.
And for me, it was in the original Whispering Cairn, because that was where Akosiel's tomb was. And the idea, I think, was that you went and got there and you got the first part of the rod. My lot got
First
to
part
it.
of the rod?
Well, didn't you get a...
Nah.
I can't
You just
remember
get
what
some
got in
bits.
there.
You just get some
You get
stuff
some-
from Zosiel's tomb. But yeah.
So they looked at it.
I seriously fucked up there. I was thinking,
No.
what have I missed? Did I scroll
I
past
can't
a really important?
I can't
Did I
remember.
scroll past a really important part of the PDF?
Take out folder 5, Mike. Come on.
Yeah, shit.
So my guys, they looked at it and went, "Oh, we're not going to mess around with the tomb unless we absolutely have to." So all those goodies are still there, waiting for some. Yeah, exactly.
Spoiler!
So
We've warned our readers, Lucas.
No, I mean for us.
you
You did this, Lucas.
Oh,
You did
yes.
this.
we did do it. Oh, okay.
You did do this. The bit that you didn't do was down the other elevator. You never went
right.
down the elevator
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
either, what were they called? JJ
Yes.
and Digger, the two
Yeah.
bandits who were with Madam Wodge.
Madam Watch of the Lodge.
I kind of asked you about that, and you kind of put me off it.
I didn't put you off it. I
You
just,
sort of did, not actually, but you sort of
Yeah.
went, well, you know. I
yeah,
asked,
well, I mean,
yeah.
what do you want me to say? I wasn't going to go, well, I mean, absolutely must.
Yeah, there's loads of magic
That would have
down
been
there.
just as bad. The thing that
But
had
that's
to be
where we
changed-
are. So on the way out, Mike, that's where we go.
No, you've already. The thing that had to be changed for
We're
us
getting there now.
because
We're gonna have to
was
run
that
the
I had to
lantern
move.
somewhere.
I moved the lantern, right? So Mike, you played the
Mm.
lantern. The lantern in the original is
no, I nicked your idea. Actually,
Oh, did you?
I took the lantern and put it in the what was his name? The policeman's office.
Cubbins. Yeah,
Abbins.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fucking
the-
hell. Abbins.
The reason for that was basically to get them out
Nasty
of the tomb.
piece of work.
Yeah, I retain the right to remain violent.
Yeah.
I had to get them out of the tomb because it was all getting a bit, I don't know, dungeon crawly. And I thought, if I put the lantern in town and I give them a great big signpost in the form of
Madam Watch of the Lodge.
that they have to go to town to find it, it will break
I've
up
always
the...
found that voice really annoying.
Have you? Well, it's-
Yeah.
It's
Johnny's-
fantastic. It's one of my favourites.
It's Johnny's. It's I can claim no credit or whatever, or blame
Yeah,
whatever.
what's Johnny?
Johnny has a character called. Basically, we name all the NPCs in the whole thing after Johnny's characters, right? I'm not joking. I think we've basically on about our 4th or 5th, right? And Madam Wodge of the Lodge was a character that Johnny ran. Who
Baron
Very, very high
shiny
voice.
head.
there's Baron Shiny Head, the leader of the lizard folk, and all of that.
Rabadabadas.
Rabadabadas, who you've just met, Marcus Doomer. I mean, the list goes on and on. Anyway,
Yeah.
and Thingy, is it Mernts Dankbarrel, the spherical floating wizard? That was the main thing I changed, and it's interesting that you changed it too. I mean, obviously you'd listened to the show, so
Yeah.
whatever.
So the reason I changed it was I liked the way you had them having to break into the police station or the
Yeah.
guard station or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I liked that, and I thought it worked really well. So I thought I was gonna have that, and you know the lantern being just stuck in a
in the
down
corner.
one. Yeah, it was like that doesn't really make sense.
How much did you use Balabar Smenk, Mike, in your way
So-
of running it?
not a huge amount.
Same here.
So he was always there as a vague threat.
Yeah.
He came into it a little bit more in the second book, The Three Faces of Evil, after they'd done the. So I think I curtailed the amount of dungeon crawling that they needed to do in that one as well.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
By having Balabar sort of, I think he attempted to become a goodie at that point.
Oh.
But only as a let me see if I can get out of this, and then resorted to form, and then got arrested and banged to rights kind of thing.
It's odd that he is meant to be the main antagonist in the first book and the second book. He's the character that's like, ooh, the pantomime villain that you get shown as you first read through the adventure.
You need to do the show of force early on. You need to see him being. We never really saw him. So
no, I know, but we started at the gateway to the cairn. We started at the entrance in order to just start
in the inn, sort of, didn't we? But yeah, you should have seen.
Well, that was done with a bit of backstory that was actually done after we started.
And I think that's one of the problems with pre-written modules. Is so if that was your module that you'd thought up, and you're absolutely right. You know, he needs a big show of force early doors to sort of make himself known, but it doesn't really come across in the book.
Yeah,
and sort of by the time you realise in book 2 he is a show of force, you've already run book 1, and don't forget these books would have come out each month.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, it felt to me that Whispering Cairn was written and sort of almost pasted on.
There's definitely a sense here that you've got freelancers taking their best adventure ideas, and then you've got an over-editor taking these individual sections and stitching them together into a narrative, right?
I'm not so sure.
Isn't that what they did with Lost, the TV series? That at the end they just literally had all the writers just writing stuff and then throwing them in a bowl, excuse the term, and then pulling them out and saying, right, make some sense of that. And that's how they did it, apparently.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
But I'm not so sure. I think the way that Paizo work is they come up with a story arc, and they would have gone, okay, the first book has to be a standalone kind of dungeon. It has to be something that, we'll sow some seeds that we can then pick up on later. And then they find a freelancer to write it. So they say, this part has to be like this. And then they give it to the next writer, and they say, this part needs to be like this. And they dish out the stories, and so there's a fair amount of freedom for each writer of each book, because they're given the start point and the end point, and then they have to just fill in the gaps. It's what you do in a TV soap or something, where they have different writers.
Yes, so they may be given a framework to drop their adventures into, but I don't know. Anyway, I mean, the Whispering Cairn does seem a very standalone thing, and all of the Windduke stuff. You've got to be careful about spoilers here. It's not. How do we put this, Mike?
Well, I think the Windduke's...
It's not really there. It's not really relevant.
It's not that it's not relevant.
They're really involved in Whispering Cairn. And then they sort of disappear, don't they? Until book 6. Yeah. Gathering the Winds, where
then you're not allowed to talk about them anymore, Mike, because we're stuck.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Damn it.
I think that they are an interesting side story. They add... What they've done for me, by the way, they're a complete gift, because they've added a history and a mythology to a setting that didn't exist.
Yeah.
That's helped me out enormously, because I didn't have any of this stuff.
And how much did the players pick up on it, though, Mike? Did they later on? Did they instantly recognise a lot of stuff, or did it just?
You really haven't listened to all that many episodes.
I missed the central section of it, but
they have no idea. Not a Scooby.
So here's the giveaway. We have a Slack channel, which is The Plot.
It's called Worm Plot.
Worm Plot. Which is
people paste stuff in it, and you know what? Nobody's posted anything in it for about 3 months.
And then every now and again, Mike goes, "Oh, for fuck's sake," and gives us sort of like the story so far.
I see.
I was listening to 100 and whatever it was, and you did a commune spell. And Johnny's question for the gods was, will this be useful in our quest to defeat whatever they're called? That was the question. And you're like, how much time and energy has been sunk into this by me, like piezo, right? And you just will just be useful in our quest to defeat whatever.
I've just been listening to episode 100B, and this bit where it's like none of us know why we're there. The whole conversation.
That is classic.
A whole conversation about why we're there, and is it something? No, isn't it the rod? We're here to get the rod. Johnny thinks.
Pinching of the bridge of the nose. I think that was the.
Yes.
That stuff is not confected, Steve. That stuff is real. I find it extraordinary. So the Wind Duke thing is interesting. It's backstory, and it gives you the opportunity to explore a different theme, I think, and it gives you gear, basically. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, it does. But the books in between, when they're off to...
Let's talk about book 2 then. Book 2 didn't use Smenk, right? I changed the gods, and then did you get rid of the maze, Mike?
So yes, I curtailed the maze significantly because it was huge. So I think I'm just looking at the map again quickly on that one. What I did was I got rid of all of the maze, the labyrinth of Vecna. I got rid of all of that.
Did we do that?
Yes. You know the central hall in the Dark Cathedral? There was the horrible black pool, and then you got the 3 doorways. One led to the thingy of Ban Shivu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With Piers Morgan, the giant boar, and all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other one led to the Grey Woodsman, which we'll come back to in a bit, or the lair of the Grey Woodsman. And then the other one went north to the Temple of Asmodee. And in between that door and the actual Temple of Asmodee, there was just this massive maze of like loads of encounters that just, you just looked at it and thought, what is the point of this? Right?
And it was all secret doors. Secret doors.
And Kenku.
Yeah. So I chopped all of that out. So I had the entranceway going into one of the side doors, and then just doing the bit that was where the faceless one was, wasn't it? So So I did that, and then the other one, the Citadel of Hextor,
which is for us was Ban Shivu. Yep.
I effectively emptied Vecna's labyrinth of people, and then I had them all in almost like a big standoff in Hextor, and I let them all fight it out and my players picking people off at the side because I just felt that they could very quickly get overrun, right? Because there's a whole cult down there. So I had the cult run for it basically. Yes, I think so. Yeah, so I had
take the lift.
A little bit of a standoff, a bit like the English.
And did you edit
when the Romans
the caverny bit, the erythnal bit? Did you edit that down?
That was where Johnny died, wasn't it?
Yes. Spoiler alert, Grimbold, was eaten. His face was eaten by a roper. Yeah.
Yes, that was it.
That bit, I massively edited that down.
Oh, no, I kept that because I quite liked that. I like the fact that you had to do some dropping down, and it wasn't just a sort of a straightforward linear kind of thing. You had to drop down, climb across, and then I can't remember the monster Granic Cur.
Well, there's Granic Cur.
Yeah. I thought he was a good baddie.
With the eyes stitched on, the eyeballs stitched onto his face.
He was really good. I really liked him. So I ran him. I ran that encounter almost completely as it was.
And then what happened with the thing in the pool? We had it so that it was sort of, they heard it being, as it were, summoned into being when they finished exploring. And then they saw its effect as it had rampaged through Diamond Lake. Did you have that?
Yes, I did. I did exactly the same there as well, yeah.
And it's there that they met Uncle Buggy, because Uncle Buggy had been involved in the fight with Hesty Testapod. Did you keep Alostan, or did you use? You didn't rename it to Hesty Testapod.
I didn't. No. I used Hesty Testapod as a name because I liked it, and it made me laugh, and I thought tip a little nod to that. So I had a druid in the woods that helped do certain things. So when they found the owl bear cub, they took it to Hesty Testapod, the
bear owl.
The bear owl. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I had.
They didn't set it on fire.
No.
Like a little torch.
No.
Like a little flaming. Okay, good. They didn't render the fat down into the floor.
No.
That was Johnny. That was entirely.
That was Johnny.
Johnny.
And I actually
did he have a song?
I had at the very end one of my rangers in the party. That was his sort of end game, was that he went and met back up with Hesty, the druid, and became a bear owl trader.
Oh, the only thing I added into the second one was the orrery, which you found in the caverns of the Grey Woodsman. I don't think I really added anything else in.
I felt that was possibly the big misstep. I think the emphasis, rather than as a big dungeon crawl, should have been on Balabar Smenk and closing
Do you
things
mean
off in the town.
my misstep or
no,
the adventure's misstep?
their misstep.
Well, it's my misstep then, because actually the way that it is meant to work, that book, is that a bit like book 5, you're dipping in and out of a dungeon crawl while you try and bring down Balabar Smenk. Is that right, Mike? Have I got that right? Sort of. You're trying to find evidence.
That would make it very big, though. But I would, I would have focused more on the Balabar Smenk bit.
Yeah.
Well, but then you've got the dungeon, and it's like you've got to have the bloody well dungeon, haven't you? But yes, absolutely. I mean, all the time I'm thinking, which bits did I... You don't know whether or not it would have been better or not to leave it in. Book 3, we started with a whole bit that is not in the adventure as written, which was the Garm Farm, the Bugbear Raid, the diamonds, the chase through the woods, all of that stuff. That's not in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I quite enjoyed
I don't know
that.
how you did it, Mike.
I didn't do any of that.
Basically, the problem was they had a journey of 2 days to get to Blackwall Keep. We needed an overnight thing, something to happen, just for something to break up the journey. That's all it was really meant to be, and then tweak it and add some elements that might play out later. That's all it was.
Yeah,
that's all it was.
I didn't need those because obviously I don't have the podcast, so I ran it simply as a you have to camp out somewhere. And I think I rolled for a random encounter, didn't get one. So just had them then arrive at Blackwall Keep the next day or the next evening. In fact, thinking about it, I think I had some small-scale ghast or ghoul kind of encounter in as they were getting there.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember if that was a random thing or if it was in the book.
I mean, I feel obviously it's obvious in hindsight. I didn't think they would go after the money. Or rather, it didn't occur to me that they might go after the money.
It's like you've never met us.
I know. I feel so stupid. They were just like bloodhounds, right? They were like that Disney bloodhound that just sniffs along the ground. And they wouldn't let it go. And it's like, shit, I've got to improvise this whole thing now. So that whole section with the bugbear and the chase through the forest and at night going down the river and looking for tracks. I mean, that was just, I had to sort of, I don't know, I just sort of had to sort of pull it out of my head somewhere.
Well,
and then I got
bugbear in my underpants, which I suppose.
It did.
Wasn't that the one with Johnny when he had a toad or something hopping in front of...
That was later on.
Yeah.
Same book. But that whole bit, I got a week then to go away and think, right, what's going to happen when they find this bugbear, right? What's going on? And it was then that I thought, well, the bugbear has been wormed. And then that was where I then started stitching the gems back into the story of the Outsplinters. But none of that stuff is planned. Best thing about D&D.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what it did as well is it inserted, as if it needed it, inserted mistrust between the characters.
It certainly did.
Quite liked that book, actually. Looking back at it now, I quite liked, because that was the first one that brought Ilthane into it.
Yes.
It's the first one where you heard that there was a dragon, and they were.
Yeah.
I can remember them being quite nervous as they went into the egg chamber. The thought of there potentially being a black dragon on the other side, they were definitely nervous at that point. So I quite liked that book.
My recollection of it was that it was quite chaotic. They split themselves up.
Yes.
They were running around this lizard folk lair, and they don't think that we really ever had a moment where they thought there was going to be a dragon around the corner. It was more about the threat. I like that. I like that book, actually. When I read it, I thought, they're not going to like this, and I'm not going to like this. And that just shows how you can just get these things completely wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're changing the nature of the lizard folk.
Posh lizard folk, it's a gag. It's quite. I mean, it's a passably decent gag, but it doesn't change the structure of the adventure.
No, I know.
And then we move on from there to book 4, and that I think for us was the big departure. So this is the book called The Hall of Harsh Reflections, book 4, written by Jason Bullman, who is the chief designer at Paizo, chief designer of Pathfinder, and it relies upon a particular. Well, Mike, tell us how it works. How is it meant to work?
This was the shape changer one, wasn't it?
Yeah, so, the doppelganger.
The doppelganger. Yeah. So yes, I needed to bring in a new character at this point.
Right.
My son joined us. which is great. It's brilliant to have your kids sort of follow up and then start playing D&D with you and your mates kind of thing. So I needed to bring him in, but then I was also aware that I needed to bring in a doppelganger. And it couldn't obviously be him because that was just too obvious and stuff. But it was quite a nice city dungeon, wasn't it? And
the Sodden Hold, the doppelganger hideout, and all of that was fantastic.
Yes,
Never have so many characters failed so many perception checks, investigation checks. Extraordinary.
Yes, in fact, I can remember that was the one where you had the artificial pretend Hesty at the end, wasn't it?
Yes.
That was sort of like just to cap it all at the end.
That adventure basically works or doesn't work on one specific encounter, which is that it's all set up so that you're investigating this bandit lair in the city, and you meet yourselves. And the only way that works is if the doppelgangers have managed to substitute one of the characters. Did you run that adventure as written in terms of the first bit with the inn and all of that stuff?
So the way I ran it, and I'll be honest, I can't remember whether it was from you or from the book itself. So I ran it that they went to an inn, and that's where they met the new player. And then there was a sort of big street parade and lots of stuff happening outside.
Yeah.
And then I had a bit of an ambush scene.
Yeah.
And one of the players got sort of tumbled to the floor. And at that point, I sent him a quick text message and said, that thing that we've talked about now, that's happening now.
You did it exactly the same as me.
Yeah.
We probably had a conversation.
We possibly talked.
I think we have.
Yeah, we did talk about it.
Does it specify that only one of the characters gets replaced?
No, but it does it very differently. In the adventure as written, there is a sequence at the beginning where you realise that there is a gang of doppelgangers at work trying to get you into trouble that doesn't resolve itself. And then the actual switcheroo, where you substitute a doppelganger for a character, is done in this incredibly complex, I think, like riven with opportunities for it to fall over encounter, where you're sort of arrested for a crime you didn't commit because a doppelganger committed it, and taken off to prison. Have I got this right, Mike?
Yes.
Can you remember reading this?
Yeah.
And then it depends on all tab A goes into slot B. Every piece of the kind of machinery works exactly as it should do. And then you end up with one character swapped. The big problem was that if that doesn't work, A, you can't swap the character. B, by the time you do swap the character, you've told the characters that there are doppelgangers. If you do that, I know you lot. If I'd told you that there was a doppelganger gang, easy for me to say, after you, from that point onwards, you wouldn't trust each other, right? You wouldn't.
Yeah.
So what you had to do was have it so that the swap was done with you having no idea about any doppelgangers.
Yeah.
What I decided to do was engineer the swap during the ambush, which is not where it's meant to happen. And I agreed with Johnny, with Uncle Buggy, that he would be swapped at that point. I didn't give him the details, and I did exactly what Mike did, which is at a certain point, I messaged Johnny and said, right, that's it, it's done. And then we'd agreed that he would then start using the phrase, is it dirty?
I thought that was Johnny.
Yeah.
I thought
Is
that
it
was Johnny
dirty?
just coming up with more flavour for his character.
Yeah.
That was the passcode to get through the traps and the rooms in the Sodden Hold. When you open the door with the planks leading across the water and you're attacked by the invisible stalkers, the first thing that Buggy does is say, is it dirty, in the doorway, and then he's not attacked as he goes through.
Right.
Because that adventure effectively marches you up a hill, takes you to the peak, goes, here you go, and then it marches you down again. But if you don't get to the top of the hill, it doesn't work. So both Mike and I remember
we were talking
discussing
at that
it.
point, because looking through it, the real PC is going to be imprisoned for several days, and it just I seem to remember thinking that doesn't sound fun. How did you do it? And I think we had a chat.
I just said I'd cut it all out. I mean, as always, the answer is I just got rid of the whole thing. The other thing is that I just knew that if there was an encounter with doppelgangers, from that point onwards, they wouldn't trust anybody. They wouldn't trust.
Yeah.
Other than that adventure is pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, and we had a sort of a moment that happened in there, because I think one of our players was the one that got switched was a cleric who did guidance quite a lot, and they wondered what was going on, because quite frequently he wouldn't do guidance. They'd be trying to do something, and I play with a father and a son, and the level of bickering escalated quite dramatically. They're like, well, why aren't you going to give me guidance? Oh, you don't need it. It's fine. So that was quite funny. And then obviously after we resolved it and he'd gone back to his regular character, every time they go into an encounter now, if there's any fighting to be done, it's right, quickly cast guidance just to prove you're not a doppelganger. Like, oh, here we go.
It's a brilliant idea, as if you needed to sow any more mistrust, right? But it's just a great way of making people not. I mean, we still use, if it is the real Parker, we still use that phrase.
It sounds like the two of you quite like the way it was engineered, because you come up with the idea and then you've got to come up with the way that it actually happens.
I didn't like the way that it was done in the book because it was just very complicated to run. But I did like the fact that what you do is surprise people, and at that point, I mean, that is, I don't know, how did you get on with running that actual encounter, Mike? You know, the one when they encounter themselves. What did you do?
So the way I did it, I had them stumble into a room, and the original character that had been doppelganged, I'm not sure if you can verb a doppelganger.
This sounds rude.
He was
Double
there,
teamed,
sort of bound and tied up, and I then had a mirror character for each of the others, so it was 4-on-4, and then I basically had it such that as the combat went, it started to get a little bit complicated, and you know who was who.
I'm still not sure. So the two of you during that combat, were they fighting each other?
Yeah,
or did they fight across each other? So the different characters would fight different characters.
My lot all picked a fight with themselves, effectively. So individual characters on individual characters.
Can you remember how we did it?
Colour code.
Yes, and we used the Cuthbert thing. So coincidentally, Paul and I had a discussion, and he decided that he wanted to change characters. So we had an incident earlier on, before the doppelganger encounter, where Cuthbert left them all behind, and then we were going to wait to substitute his new character in at the right moment. So we could use, the doppelgangers knew this, had been watching them, and therefore could put Cuthbert in the room as a doppelganger.
Yep.
That gave them the impression that the reason that they'd lost Cuthbert was because they weren't quite sure. You know, he'd disappeared, he left a note, but then he's in front of them. That's where we introduced the broom cupboard. We would jump into the broom cupboard and have a quick chat about what was going on, and then people would come out of the broom cupboard and run that character based upon the amount of information that we exchanged. It sort of held together, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I'm still not quite sure how that worked out. All I know is that...
I think I figured out quite early on that Cuthbert wasn't real,
did.
Because there was no counterpoint for Cuthbert. That was a bit of a tell, but I think it worked well. I think
it worked well. I think it was
well. I think you all thought
that Johnny was up to no good quite early on, but you weren't sure about Parker and you weren't sure about Sessions, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Because you were asking each other questions that only each other would know the answer to, but what you didn't know was that doppelgangers can read minds.
Yeah.
So we were rolling initiative to see which character answered the question first, and then you were having to wonder whether or not... It's a really brilliant...
But then I think, like you said, we just sort of solved that problem ultimately in that I just basically made my Parker attack the other Parker, and that's sort of like, you know...
That's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it.
But as a DM, Mike, those sort of things, although you can have best laid plans, I suppose you really just have to see what the players do, come up with and change your actions accordingly. That's all you can do, isn't it?
Yeah, the edit could also fix a lot. I think the actual recording, the actual session where we played the combat out was a bit chaotic, but the edit, it benefited from the fact that we were able to get rid of a lot of the kind of confused background chatter and turn it into a bit more of a straightforward combat encounter where nobody, especially the readers, had any idea what was going on.
I think that's the difference, isn't it? When you're doing it for a podcast, something like that. I think mine probably got quite complicated, and it got a little bit silly, but it kind of didn't matter. We just muddled through. And at the end of the combat,
whereas ours was not at all complicated or silly. Yeah.
but you have to tell a story as well with yours.
I think it worked pretty well, and then from then on, that adventure is pretty straight. Did you just then run it as was, Mike?
Yes.
From that point onwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Went off and found Zerxog, and
I love Zerxog.
Yeah, Zerxog's. Yeah.
Your fear is a pleasing garnish.
The thing about Zerxog is still not sure how he ties in with the whole story.
Well, he doesn't really. I mean,
Right.
he's basically, it's a classic Paizo, create a bad guy and leave a note in a box in his office that tells you why he was there. Zerxog is hired by Rachnian to kill you.
Right.
It's as simple as that. And all that really means is that A, you've got somebody to go after, and B, when you've finished going after them, you find out who was behind it all. And that then, at that point, you've met Eligos?
Yes, have met Eligos.
Yes, we met her on the way.
Eligos is a bloke in the written adventure. And there's another character called Celeste. Is that right?
Yeah,
Mike?
it is. And I didn't bother with Celeste. I thought she just...
No, nor me.
I swapped her in as Garth Southportal.
Garth Southportal.
I swapped her in as the sister, I think.
La Hacker.
Yeah. So I had Celeste as the sister instead.
I got rid of the Celeste character who doesn't do anything. I now realise that actually they do something, but they just turn up later.
Yes. I had to get rid of her then as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I'm doing the same. Yeah, exactly. The only other thing that we did was we put the pretend Hesty Testapod in that. That was a really good combat.
That was a really good combat.
That was a great
we were
combat.
Down to the wire on that one.
Yeah.
You were in real trouble because you sort of fell for it completely, much more completely than I ever would have imagined because of the doppelganger thing. And
I think we were all so sort of relieved to have finished the doppelganger combat that we just sort of literally that was the whole discussion because we didn't rest and we just basically carried straight on, walked straight into it. You know, we're all sort of like on cloud nine, and then that was it. Wham! Fireball. Completely wasted us.
Yeah, lightning won't strike twice.
Yeah.
You're expecting to do the high-fiving, aren't you? And then you get fireballed.
Yeah, we don't get suckered like that very often, but we did there.
Yeah.
I didn't think any or all of you said, I think this is the real Hesty Testapod. Everything is fine now. I think you were a bit cautious, but you just weren't so cautious as to not set yourselves up for a giant fireball and then just laid waste to everything. Yep. And then as soon as that had happened, everything was just...
Yeah.
You had the mind flare coming from the other direction.
Oh, that's rare.
So when you started running, you opened the door and there's a mind flare waiting for you in the room with the pool.
Yeah.
And Uncle Buggy jumped off all of that. That was a great combat. Zerxog leads you to Rachnian and Eligos leads you to Rachnian, and that takes us to book 5, my favourite book of the adventure by a mile.
This is where I started, Mike. Restarted.
Right. Well,
it's a very good idea, that.
It's just a brilliant idea, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. It's just a fantastic piece of adventure writing.
Yeah.
Mike, did you tweak it? Did you fix it? What did you do?
So you and I were talking at this point, and I took your advice and I trimmed it down from I think there was like 7 or 8 different events, wasn't there? All of which were kind of the same. It was all sort of gladiatorial fighting. I cut it down to 16, I think it was. So like
which is still too many. I cut it down to 16 and regretted it ever since.
No, I think it was all right. My players are quite fast, so they
compared with us,
I don't know what that's like. Yeah, fast, efficient. Yeah.
So we weren't on this book for very long,
weren't you?
No, not a huge amount of time. I did the same as you and as recommended. You know, so in between each battle, they were down in the Undercity looking for a variety of clues and things.
My recollection is that book took us forever.
It did take us quite a while.
Yeah.
It took us forever.
And I'm glad
I think
because it was so good.
Yeah, it was very good.
I think also your descriptions, giving you a pat on the back, the descriptions of the different teams. Yeah, take it while you can. Take it while you can.
Yeah,
meant that the readers got to identify very easily with each one because of the characters that you portrayed and the voices and stuff. So every time it wasn't like, who were they again? You instantly recognised them.
It took us 25 episodes.
25.
Wow.
Didn't feel like it.
Just quickly on the old pat on the back thing, the readers came up with the teams, about at least half of them.
Oh,
the Harrowing Horde, the Halflings, whatever they were called, the Anvil of Thump. I put a thing out on Twitter saying I need gladiatorial teams for the games, and people just sent them in with like full descriptions, like you need farmers with agricultural implements.
The most disappointing ones were Dice and Desire, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I put them in just to be nice.
It feels like that one is written with a specific pacing in mind. So if you've got 32 teams, you've got a fixed number of fights. But if you reduced it to 16, wouldn't that mess with the timing?
In the original adventure, it's a really odd setup where all the teams take the field at the same time.
Yeah.
And just there's a giant free-for-all. And
how the hell are you going to run that?
Right, at a D&D weekend with a huge table and a giant battle mat, that would just be hilarious, especially giving each player a team. Yeah?
Yeah.
But I think for our purposes, I just thought that was just going to get horribly confusing. And so I thought, I'll cut it down, what I thought radically, down to 16 teams. What? I mean, 8 teams is plenty. Anybody listening to this who wants to run this adventure path, 8 teams is plenty.
But it did give them a time limit between each fight. And
we didn't know how difficult the other teams were going to be. We didn't know if we were going to get knocked out and therefore not be able to continue. So you've got that kind of pressure of you've got to get as much done every night as you can, because tomorrow you may be out.
Yeah.
I mean, I only statted the teams that I knew you were going to face, and I knew who you were going to face. I mean, the whole thing's complete.
I know, but it was great.
What I liked about it was this idea. We've talked about this before. It's the classic. You were talking about the famous 5. This still rankles with me, by the way, Steve.
Excellent.
But the idea that you have an adventure where you have to effectively sneak around outside school in order to get stuff done, but then you've got to be back, as it were, at your desk in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, that adventure had an element of that idea that you would do what you did, and then when everybody else went to bed, you would kind of get out there and start sneaking around. Yeah. Okay, it's a bit of Harry Potter, a bit of whatever. Quite Enid Blyton. Yeah. That's a very sort of classic structure. Yeah. That's a really good idea. Gladiatorial games are a great idea. An enclosed environment is a great idea. Put them all together, it's just fantastic.
So Lucas and Dan, in terms of that, did that stop you, or not stop you, did it prevent you from sort of diving into combat in between the gladiatorial games more than normal, because you sort of think we've got to save ourselves for the game?
I don't think it did, actually. And we had this conversation also, because Graham also runs or has run this dungeon, the Barrow Maze, which is basically also you're in a village somewhere, and effectively where the barrows are, between there is like no man's land. You're not allowed to, you don't want to be there at night because nasty things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. So you're there to sort of, plunder this barrow. It's all about that dungeon economy stuff. So working out what your resources are for the day. When do you plan when you go down? Okay, we've got 8 hours, so we can have a combat, but we've got to be back by, 12 o'clock because we're on the 8 o'clock game or whatever, and we need 8 hours to rest.
Yeah.
There were moments where you decided to make your escape because you were worried about whether or not you get an opportunity to rest enough.
Yeah, but I don't think that it actually detracted in any way. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it actually makes it almost better, because if you're in that kind of like, we just hammer away at this room with long rests until you get it done, that's actually...
Welcome to book 7, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
No, I thought it was great fun to play, and I think all the bits worked, and I think sort of planning how you were going to run your next bout, because essentially we had one rest between both sessions, and actually we had the rest after the night session. So we would go exploring and then we'd have the rest in time for the fight.
Yeah, of course.
So we'd be rested for the fight. So the logic was, if you could get through the fight having used minimal resources, you had more left for the evening session.
Which teams did you use, Mike?
I'm just going to have a quick...
I have to praise Dan here. I mean, best combat, although it wasn't like in terms of the length of the stuff we did, but Dan tricking Procyon and Sirius into basically attacking the judges. I mean, that is, that is just such a really good moment. You're expecting this really, really long combat.
They were fun, those
It's
two.
a Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
good.
They were fun, those two. I like those two.
Yeah.
The overhead on that adventure was just coming up with loads of teams, loads of colour, loads of characters, zillions of voices.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the most complicated adventure I've ever run, I think, as a DM in all my...
But it worked.
I had spreadsheets of people. What were your teams, Mike?
So I used Arcane Auriga, I used Oryx Warband. I used Iron Hill Monkeys. The Snow Leopards, the Crazy Eight.
I could just hear Dan and Lucas thinking, "Oh, we didn't get that."
I just don't know which one any of these are.
The Grave Diggers.
We had
the Grave Diggers. Well, we changed that to Filge, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I brought Filge in as well.
Did you? Well, yes. Mike, bless your heart.
You have to, don't you? Because
he's my favourite character.
He's certainly up there. He's not on my list actually of favourite NPCs.
I think that battle in the gladiatorial things with Filge, where you had all of the past sort of bosses or enemies and that coming back, and Madame Modge of the Lodge. I won't do the voice.
Madame Modge of the Lodge.
Yes, that one. That was fantastic. Just for us listening, for all the different characters to come back was great.
Those continuations of themes that make a big difference.
Yeah.
You only just survived book 5, by the way. I mean, it was nip and tuck in that last combat. I think Parker was basically done for. And Burple.
It was Burple, yeah.
Burple saved the day. I think Uncle Buggy was also a bit of a hero in that combat. But anyway, on to book 6. Now, Mike, talk to us about book 6. What did you think of it?
I enjoyed the concept. And interestingly, listening to your podcast today, I have halfway through there, I think you sort of summed it up as just was quite a lot of hard work. It wasn't quite as much fun as maybe it should have been.
Maybe a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like that. So I ran it pretty much as was.
So you included the whole thing with the ghoul people and all of that stuff? Yes.
So I had...
What?
Yeah, don't worry, guys. We'll talk about that in a second.
So I had them go down the falling river. So I had a big complicated climb down, and then some Wind Warrior ambush bits down to the True Tomb. But I then had them go right the way down to the very bottom, where the ghoul and that...
Whatever he was called.
Yeah.
What's he called? Marito?
Marito, yeah. Now, he had something that...
But he had the seal.
That's it. Yes, he had the seal. So I had them go down and find him. I quite enjoyed that one. I thought the bit where the pillars, when they were hopping across the pillars, that was potentially quite interesting. But again, it just didn't quite.
No, it's total wipeout.
Yeah, those things rarely do though.
Johnny was a little underwhelmed by it. It was like, well, that should be more difficult. Well, you have the air elementals that come up and try and interfere. Really, you could spend hours on that, and all you do is end up on the right pillar at the right time, and it's all just it's a tax, basically. It's a progress tax.
Yeah.
Paying tax is rarely an interesting process. If you can make it interesting, then fine.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's just a lot of people going, okay, I can jump 5, and then I make a test, and I'll check, I do an agility, whatever. I mean, it just really... The main thing that we changed for the pod was we just got rid of all of that, Mike. The seal was with Hesty Testapod, and then I put a MacGuffin key in to free Hesty Testapod and gave that to Flycatcher the Spider.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
In the Adventure as Written, Dan and Lucas, you drop past where you found the tomb.
Mm-hmm.
You're only about a third of the way down.
To work our way back up again or something.
You keep all the way down, and there are these sort of aristocratic ghouls who you have to have this sort of role play standoff with in order to get the seal and then go all the way back up. I looked at it and I thought that is 5 or 6 episodes and we aren't going to do that. And so I thought, right, what we'll do is we'll make more of the spider. We'll make the spider jump backwards and forwards to the shadow plane and just condense it down into that. And then there's all this stuff. That river has got a far bank that goes on elsewhere. And if you go down the dead-endy bits that you looked at, there is a passage up into a whole other complex of like temple-y stuff with wind-dukey things. And I just thought this is going to take months.
Yeah.
So I just got rid of it all.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Basically junked.
Wasn't there?
I junked at least half the adventure. I
felt that the journey prior to going back into the cairn was a little rushed. I would have. So what happens? You get back there and everything's destroyed. And it's like, quick, run over to the cairn. It's just like, I would have had a bit more happen before.
Damn. You see, there you go. The stuff you cut out.
And it's interesting from when I was listening to the bit where you were describing the river, the Blood River, and all of the tributaries and going into this room and coming out. That got quite hard to follow because you obviously had a visual. I think you had a visual, you guys. And for the reader, it was quite difficult to think, well, where are they talking about? So it was. Yeah. So when you moved away from that, it was a little bit, and this is only my only little side of it, was great. I can visualise where they are now. So
there's not much else to say about book 6, is there? I mean, massively redacted. The other thing I changed was I didn't think it was going to be particularly interesting for you to fight the dragon as you came out again.
Yeah.
So I had it dead. Now, Graham, who's not with us, sent us some quick fire questions. Hello, welcome. I can't resist this. It's the entertainment. Shall I go round with these questions? Let's go round. I'll do the question. Everybody zip round. You tell me what you think. Graham wants to know best combat in the adventure so far. Let's go round, starting with Dan.
Oh, put me on the spot. I'm just going through what I remember. I kind of liked, strangely, even though it's not my favourite book, the combat in book 2, which is the one with the maze, which you know, is basically the section to the right.
Yeah, with all of the cultists and the giant boar and what's her name in the combat room where you go in and she's on. So that was a good combat. Good.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Steve?
I think, well, the couple that stand out for me, and this might be a bit of a weird one, but when you went down into the passages and behind the curtain, there was a bowl with a gooey monster in it.
This is my answer.
And it came out and was teleporting up the passageways and it split the path.
The blancmange.
Yeah. And I just think that...
And the door we couldn't open.
That's it.
Yeah, the door you couldn't open. That's my favourite combat.
And I think it just really challenged the players, but also they were petrified of a curtain. And it was fantastic.
Absolutely terrifying. Well, because curtains and tapestries are always
Of course.
Yeah. It's just one of those rules.
And obviously the face behind that was on the wall, they spent ages thinking it was going to do something dreadful to them, and it was a one-shot thing. The other one was just the Cubbins and gang when they came out and had to fight. I really enjoyed that.
That was good fun.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, tricking Procyon and Sirius, basically, I just really enjoyed the trickery.
And Mike, what's your favourite combat? And you can answer in terms of being a DM and having run it for your own group, and which one has worked out best for you?
For me, I actually really enjoyed the Ulthane combat on the way into the cairn. So in my head, I had it very much as a big sort of wide open space, and I had them trying to cross the big wide open space, and I had Ulthane sort of coming in and sort of trying to pick them off and things like that. And it visually, it just worked for me. I really liked that one.
And mine would be, I think, either the fake Hesty-Testapod or the same one, Steve. I liked the blancmange when they couldn't open the door. That made me laugh. Right, favourite NPC. These are quick fire answers. Dan.
Favourite NPC has got to be Hesty.
And your least favourite NPC?
Madam Wodge of the Lodge.
Steve.
Sorry,
Steve.
I'd say Cubbins, because I know lots of people in London exactly like that. And the least favourite was Garth South Portal. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just Gareth Southgate himself.
Hey, Steve, that's a really harsh thing to say. Lucas?
So I got 3 favourites, just quickly. 1, Hesty, because, well, he's our man, best in the land. 2, Hillary, because I really enjoyed the story point of that. And 3rd, of course, Chang Fankum. Just for the acoustic running gag.
Yeah, great. For the laugh. What about you, Mike?
So I think for me, obviously, Hesty, Alastan. But I really liked Zerxog as well.
And your least favourite? Or added to everybody's least?
My least favourite was the Faceless one, because I thought that had so much potential, but it just kind of didn't go anywhere, really.
My least favourite, Laka. It's just so boring.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Well, yeah. It's quite boring.
You kept thinking that there was some necessity to sort of ask her questions or something.
And she just
the whole time was just, I don't know.
My least favourite was Rachnian.
Right.
They plumb him into the adventure. They plug him in. They wire him in. And then they don't really give you very much to do. So if you any characters that start going after Ragni and like, where does he live? What does he do? How does he work? There's nothing there. There's nothing for you to use.
Right.
And also he's just like such a standard. He's basically kind of, I'll get you meddling. It's just, I didn't like him.
And the fact
Your
that
favourite?
you have to be there and then you arrive.
My favourite, Talabir. No, I don't know. I love Talabir. I
Bilge.
can't stop doing the voice.
Filch.
Maybe Marcus. No, let's not get into that. Best plot twist, Dan.
Oh, best
That's a tough question.
plot twist, I think, was when we found the head of that boy.
Oh, yes. Spenge, the Spenge kid.
Yeah. I was
Steve?
kind of like,
I
we
think
messed up
I
there.
was struggling with this one, and I think that is the only one, because I missed a book or two, I think that's the one I
Yeah.
would pick as well.
Lucas.
Well, the doppelgangers. I mean,
Lucas on a jet plane. Sorry. The doppelgangers.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's what-
excellent.
Yeah.
plot
And that it was
twist.
Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Mike.
I think it was the doppelgangers as well. I really enjoyed that bit.
I don't think there's another twist as such, right? I mean, I'm trying to think. I would go with the doppelgangers. I think it was just very well constructed. Now, what were people's most exciting book? Start with Dan. I think we're all going to agree on the same one, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. Book 5.
Book 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Book 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
think. Yeah.
Yeah, same,
The Champion's Belt.
same as me.
Champions
Yeah.
Belt.
Steve. Well, Steve's only listed. Steve's only listed.
Yeah,
Five,
yes, but
book
only
6,
the
book
best
1.
ones. No,
Yeah.
number 5, definitely.
Well, I'm
Mike?
going to throw a spanner in the works and say number 1. I really liked the Whispering Cairn. I think I said earlier, it was, to me, it's up there. It's up there with many of the best single modules. I'd happily run that again.
I'm really torn. I think I enjoyed book 5 the most, but I think the Hall of Harsh Reflections is just an extraordinary piece of clockwork adventure with all of these bits that all move around. I really think that's a really amazing piece of work. There we go. What about the dullest moment? I mean, the riches that we can pick from. We don't have to do the dullest moment. Do you want?
Well,
Should we not do
I
it?
think-
That's boring.
The only thing I was going to say, I had a bit of another point which I was going to sort of tie in to this one. One of the things that I think for me added pain and therefore dullness later in the books is just the plethora of magical items. So 5e generally is quite magic limited, magic tight.
Yeah.
Whereas this one was almost like a sort of a pinata of magical goodies that you didn't
Why
achieve.
don't we have them?
Because I got rid of them all.
God.
You have got quite a few.
You've
We're
got
okay.
quite a lot.
Yeah, we're
You're
doing that.
festooned with magical items. Seriously, I've got the spreadsheet.
Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Sessions is just like. I
I had that exactly. I actually wrote this down before tonight, which was divvying up magic items. Is I said I sort of. It was like kids at a party checking their sort of party bags and who's got the flying saucers, who's got refreshers, who's got whatever, and it's that whole thing of typical D&D with magic items when they're thrown. It suddenly then becomes a free for all, and I think for the listener, it's fun for a bit until then it's not fun.
Steve, we edit out. Honestly,
Yeah.
Steve, I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you the hours that are removed, and it's like, well, let's see if we can get this down to like 20 minutes. Yeah. A very kind reader in the States described it as like seagulls fighting over French fries.
I mean, and bitterness. I mean, there are literally sort of.
Yeah. It drives a wedge between people. And
Yeah.
what do you think is the bit that the characters completely missed or messed up? That's our last question.
So I think I said earlier, didn't I? They did all of the Whispering Cairn and then didn't open the tomb of Icosiel, or the original tomb.
Zosiel,
Zosiel, yeah.
That's
So
extraordinary.
they didn't get any of the goodies. It's a little bit like leaving a massive Christmas present under the tree on Christmas morning.
What about you, Dan, Steve?
Well, I mean, I've said it before as well. I think where the doppelganger Hesty, I think that's where we messed up the most.
Steve,
Yeah,
who has no idea who the doppelganger Hesty
I'm
is.
waiting for that one. Yeah, but in fact, I probably know more about it now than ever. But I haven't really got.
Oh shit!
Yeah, I haven't really got a party moment. But I think what's from a individual one. It's quite interesting watching Uncle Buggy constantly get separated and completely misunderstanding everyone else's tactics, and then just being left alone and looking around going,
He doesn't-
what have I done?
He doesn't misunderstand them, Steve. He willfully ignores them
You haven't met
in order
Joss
to
yet, have you?
pretend.
No.
No, you've not. We need to introduce you to Johnny,
Yeah,
Steve.
yeah.
He's an extraordinary individual. I mean, he really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, university psychology departments write papers.
I'm beginning to call him Johnny Retcon because
Yes.
essentially
I never would have done
because-
that. That's his. I needed to. Yeah. I never would have done that. Is his?
Yeah,
Is his?
I wouldn't have gone in
His
there if I'd known you'd put a dragon inside, that sort of thing, you know. But it's
Yeah.
But I would
Yeah.
never have done that.
I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Can I roll a few dice
It's
to get rid of the bad
fantastic.
numbers?
It's
That's my favourite. The idea that the numbers are queuing up in like number space.
Yeah.
Ugh,
it's fantastic though.
you wouldn't believe how much that irks me. That's like, randomness, physics. I've got a really cheesy answer. You didn't
I have
allow
a-
me to answer the dullest moment.
Oh, go on.
Oh,
I've got
yeah,
a really
okay.
cheesy answer to that. Because of course, there aren't any dull moments in D&D. Because playing D&D is always good, whatever you're doing. I mean, come on.
Okay, moving
We've
on.
been doing it for
So
40
the-
years, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. That's the end of that.
The-
Well,
the-
anyway, I
can
think
I ask a
Yeah.
question? Can I add
Yes,
one more
You've
question?
never mentioned it.
we're running out of time.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
The funniest.
We've got the
moment.
news at
44
half 7.
now.
Yeah.
Funniest moment.
The funniest moment is you not being able to open the door. Probably.
Yeah.
That's the most I've laughed. I think.
I like the tentacle bombs. The fish polymorph.
Oh, that
bomb.
was my favourite combat. I knew there was something I'd forgotten. My favourite combat was your combat against the tentacly creatures, where you changed the thingy into a goldfish. That was an awesome combat. That's in the Lair of Xerxel.
Yeah.
In fact, that's my favourite sequence in the whole thing. I knew there was something I'd forget. Steve, you've got that to look forward to.
Yeah, and I from a funniest moment, I'd have to have a good think back because I can't think of one. There's loads. There's too many.
There's breakfast at Bernie's.
Breakfast at
Goodness
Bernie's.
gracious me, I laughed at that. Just beyond all I'm still it's just the idea. And I can't remember who said it. Paul, I think, said he was fine at breakfast. That's so funny. That really makes me laugh. It was later in the day that things started to go wrong. By the weekend. Stuff still makes me laugh. Anyway, right. Everybody, that has been wonderful. Thanks, everybody. That was a really interesting chat. Maybe we should reconvene at some point. I don't know whether or not we're going to wait to the end of the book, but we should check in for another chat at some point.
Absolutely.
Do a recap of each book. Just reconvene
Well,
at
maybe
the end of
it's
each
not-
book or something.
Yeah,
think
let's
we've
not
kinda
overreach,
covered that.
Lucas. But I mean, we could, But let's
Any
just,
idea?
if we can think of stuff to talk about, and if the readers like this, we'll come back and have another little. This is sort of match of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Match of the day 2.
Highlights.
We can have a little match of the day 2 session at some point. We'll just see how we're doing. Anyway, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dr. Eusebio, Spider Lucas.
Thank you.
Leaving on a jet plane. Everybody knows just chin. We've very much enjoyed our chat. Readers, thanks for putting up with us. And we'll see you back in the adventure.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
us.
Bye, guys.
Lucas aids all round.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a laugh.
Thank you, chaps.
The Billowing Hilltop podcast is a Billowing Hilltop production. Dungeons & Dragons is a trademark of Wizards of the Coast. Music is from Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com and is used with thanks under the Creative Commons license. Additional music and sound effects come from the wonderful Sirenscape. All other original material is copyright Billowing Hilltop. Role-playing games are all about getting people together, and we use Roll20 as our tabletop, the perfect place to host your game, and Discord to host our chat. Thanks for listening.